And this is again, it's great to have these virtual meetings in some sense because we wind up with seeing people we haven't seen in a while. So Pietro Terna is presenting. I think the last time I saw him was at like a Notre Dame meeting or something like that at one of the old agent meetings. So Pietro, without any further ado, I'll let you take over.
Many thanks, Bill. Hi, everyone. It is a pleasure for me, for the research group, to be here in this wonderful workshop. Many thanks for accepting our work. I skip the outline to start from the introduction. We built a micro-based model of interacting agent following plausible behavioral rules in a world where the COVID-19 epidemic is affecting the action of everyone. The model has both infected agents subdivided as symptomatic or asymptomatic ones, and the places where the contagion can occur. And this is thanks to agent-based modeling that give us the possibility of detailing the world and the space. So the infection transmission is related to, first of all, the infected person characteristics, to those of the susceptible one, plus those of the space in which the contact occurred. In this way, we have no a priori probabilities, but ex post frequencies of the events, because the model is based upon interaction. It is not a simple micro simulation tool, but it is a true agent-based tool. The microstructure allows us to build factual, counterfactual, and conditional simulations, and we will see a few examples. The model generates complex epidemic dynamics, also because the intrinsic variability of this kind of phenomenon is very high. So we have to repeat in batches of 10,000 repetition of each simulation the experiments to have a distribution, a realistic distribution of result. The AI and the inverse generative sides of the model come from the final attempt of constructing a meta-agent with the role of optimizing the distribution of the vaccinations. And we have two ways of feeding this meta-agent. The first is introducing ex-ante rules, or very simple, named plain here, or wise, indeed seemingly wise, because we will see they are not so wise but realistic in Italy, or asking to a genetic algorithm to find the best parameters to distribute the vaccines. And the genome, in this case, is a matrix. A matrix of what? Of vaccination quotas by people groups with the time interval of application of the different groups. The model is online at this address. It is based upon NetLogo, so at this address is also possible to run it directly without download. And we have a short paper reporting the structure. The model is based on an Italian region, Piedmont, but can be easily calibrated for other areas, and contains a script manager, an interpreter, to take account of all the national or local government decision about non-pharmaceutical containment measure in the epidemic. Here you see where my region is, in Europe, Piedmont is here. And here you have the main data of the model. It is on a 1:2000 scale for a population of 3,500 people in the region. We have houses, we have schools, we have hospitals, we have nursing homes, we have factories. And in this 3D representation of the world, you see in cyan the houses, in yellow the schools, in orange the nursing homes, in pink the hospital, and in gray people going around and interacting both in closed and in open spaces. This is the structure of the model represented by a circular scheme repeated each day of the simulation. The duration of the simulation is the duration of an epidemic until no more infected agents are in the world. We have the night with the interaction among agents in houses. We have the daily activities, one or more, following the rules of the lockdown. And people go around to go to school, to go to factories, to shop, to simply move outside home, and they interact both point to point, person to person, or in closed space with naturally different rules because the contagion spreads in different ways. At this address, you have all the value of the parameters here represented in orange and all the value adopted for these parameters and a schematic representation of all the rule within the model. It is interesting having an agent-based model to represent the sequences of the contagion. How we do that? Representing via horizontal segment the time of the infection of each agent, and with the vertical segment, here we have an example, the link among an agent having the infection and another agent receiving it. Here in Piedmont, we imagine two external agents coming in the region, bringing the infection. One has no consequences, the other one is has contacts in workspaces, generating other people infected, and these people transmit the infection both in houses, this cyan segment, or in nursing homes, these orange segments. Representing a wool epidemic, we have a snail like this, with the slope representing the rapidity of the increase of the infected, of the number of infected people, and the thickness representing the quantity of agents simultaneously infected at a given time. The colors explain that the epidemic started in working places, then move to nursing homes, also houses had an action here, and then mainly a part of the epidemic is due to contagion in houses, and then again in workspaces. The slope of the snail also indicate the number of waves, the first and the second wave in this case. I repeat that we cannot use a single run of the simulation, but we have to work with batches. And the choice, having high-performance computer facilities, has been that over 10,000 runs for each batch. How to represent the result? Sure, with statistical synthesis, with usual statistics, but also with heat maps. And this is an example of heat map, the example of the epidemic in Piedmont without any control. And if we look to this square as an example, this one with 74 events, 74 epidemics with this duration, 360 days, and with, I go to the y-axis, this number of diseased, asymptomatic or symptomatic people. In this case, without any kind of non-pharmaceutical control measures, we have a heavy cloud of terrible events, sure, also with group immunity, but very, very costly in terms of infected people and of diseased ones. On the contrary, if we adopt the government decision about control using non-pharmaceutical measures, we have a cloud of short duration and limited number of infected persons, epidemics, and also the continuation in other cases with a second or a third wave until 2 years or more, because the epidemic is, I repeat, a high variability event due to person spreading of the infection. Here, anything is without vaccination, is before the introduction of vaccines. In Piedmont, we have two key dates last year, because at the end of the first wave in June, we have close the same number of infected people than in September. So a quiet summer, but then we had a second huge, very significant wave. Why? Let me specify that we have not homogeneous data due to statistical problem in Italy, explained here. We lost the possibility of subdividing symptomatic and asymptomatic persons. And let me also introduce the current situation in Piedmont, the first wave, the second wave, the third wave in spring of 2021, and we are here in the beginning of June. Without external new entry, the frequency of possible second wave epidemic in fall 2020 was quite low, 140 cases upon 10,000, with a huge number of infected people at the end of the year, more than 248,000. Huge number because the surviving infection were the most important, the most significant. With the arrival from the summer vacancies of few cases of new contagions, we have a 10%, 1,000 upon 10,000 of cases with the second wave, but with a mean quantity of contagion reduced, because also low intensity epidemic can, in this case, occur in fall. And here we have the case without new measures for the second wave. If we consider the new government measures for the second wave, we have a control reducing the number of contagion to 130,000. Here we can introduce counterfactual reasoning. The first counterfactual reasoning is related to the fact that one of us, one of the member of the group, Pietro Terna, was calculating in real time the RT each day, while the official statistics reported by the government had a delay of 20 days, a very huge delay. If using current data, updated data, it had been possible to take each decision 20 days before and conclude each phase 20 days before. The effect is quite significant. This is a counterfactual reasoning, sure, but the reduction is from 130 to 112 cases of symptomatic persons. Another counterfactual reasoning is that of paying attention mainly to fragile persons. Instead of locking the whole society and the whole economy, asking to fragile people, and mainly to fragile workers having already had some illness invalidating them, to stay home for 2 months, only 2 months from the beginning of October, without locking the whole economy, without closing school, without closing factories and shops. The effect is very interesting. Sure, it is counterfactual, but we can imagine that in mean is interesting, because we have a result similar to those obtained 130, here it is 128, with the full lockdown of the second wave. Let's resume with this recap the cases without containment measures, 130 containment measures, anticipating the decision thanks to the use of wiser data on RT updated, and the choice of applying the control upon fragile person and not to the rural population. This is very interesting before the introduction of vaccinations. Then the last part of my presentation, which is interesting for AI application and an attempt to go toward the inverse construction of the model. Here we introduce a meta-agent distributing vaccines, and the dates are close to those of the realistic in Piedmont and in Italy. The middle of February we start vaccinations, and we can distribute the vaccine considering these 7 groups, starting from extra fragile people, elderly in nursing homes as an example, teachers, workers with medical fragility, and so on. Workers, fragile people, regular people, young people. The first proposal is plain, very simple. The quotas, sorry, just a further detail. The case I am introducing here is a specific case of the surviving 1,000 second wave simulations, a specific case because each case now with the genetic algorithms require 3,000 further simulations, so a lot of calculation and time. The blue line is the starting date for vaccinations in Piedmont, and the red line is the starting effectiveness of the first vaccination. And effectively, in Piedmont, we had a pause in the epidemic, and then we had a third wave. The simpler way of distributing the vaccine is with similar quotas for all the groups. Or we can introduce a seemingly wise decision. This has been adopted, very close to that adopted in Italy, postponing the vaccination of workers. Here you have 0 until the third segment of time of the distribution of the vaccination. Workers are going around, are moving to factories, are moving to shops, are moving around in the space. And so they are distributing the contagion if they are infected. Indeed, the GA is generating a solution with the anticipation of the vaccination to workers. Then, in a second step, it is considering also extra fragile people and so on. It is a very complicated scheme, but it works. And the demonstration is in this time dynamic of the contagions. Here it is the case without vaccination. The first wave in the spring of 2020, the second wave in the fall, the third wave in the beginning of 2021, and a very heavy fourth wave in the fall of the current year, in the winter, and in the beginning of 2022. We hope this is not true, sure. This is without vaccination. Introducing the simple vaccination strategy, we have a decrease of the fourth wave, but the fourth wave is always here. And in the plain vaccination strategy, the workers are vaccinated in an anticipated way, and the fragile workers before the regular workers. Brown is the number of the workers and is the number of the workers and of the factories. The seemingly wise choice adopted in Italy, postponing the vaccination of the workers, gives the plausibility of a fourth wave quite important. And instead, using the GA strategy, that is strongly anticipated the vaccination of the workers, we have no fourth wave, and all the epidemic is finishing in the middle of the current year. Can we obtain a similar result simply increasing the quantities of the vaccination? The question is not irrelevant because now in Italy we have more possibility of vaccinations. The results are positive, but you see, we have always a tail of contagions in both the cases, both with simple or with seemingly wise decision of vaccination. So the synopsis demonstrate that in this case, one plausible case, we have a lot of cases, but I am introducing one of them, considering that at the beginning of the effectiveness of the vaccination, we already had close to 200 symptomatic people. With the vaccination decided by the genetic algorithm, the increase is quite zero, very, very low. And in the other case is more significant, also if adopting more doses or more quantities of vaccination, we obtain a result, but it is dependent from the possibility of doing that. The model is interesting, and I hope that the attempt of using genetic algorithm can be inspiring also for future work of our group. But we plan now to reproduce it in a huge scale, in a smaller scale, sorry, in a huge scale, using another tool. In this case, you have the representation of the region and a 3D representation of the different part of the population in layers to have the possibility of studying in a fine way the behavior of each layer. And the idea is that of having a 1 to 1000 scale instead of 1 to 100 instead of 1 to 1000, adopting an infection engine more fine, more detailed in the consideration of the closed spaces, and beside houses, school, hospital, nursing homes, factories, also introducing transplantation. This is a bit complicated, but it is possible, aggregation places, and taking account several networks, the family networks, the professional networks, and the network generated by individuals with a high number of contacts, so persons being hubs within the population. To do that, we will use a tool of mine. This is scientific advertising because this tool, this Agentbased tool, is free, open online, and it is derived by a swab from the Santa Fe Institute program of the 90s, reconstructed, reprogrammed in Python to have a currently easy to be used tool. And this is the work over the next few months. Concluding, I underline the importance in this case of high performance computing to run batches and to run genetic algorithms. We are time expensive. The model is especially prepared for comparative analysis. It's quite difficult to be sure of prediction in this kind of events, the spread of an infection. The model is highly parametric, and we hope to have been making a small progress in the regression of the whole of the workshop we are participating in. Here you have the slide online, but I will send them to Bill. Here you have my homepage, and most of all, my home address, also open collaborations and new possibility of application. Many thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much for that, Pietro. That was fantastic, for sure. So at this point, we have a few minutes for questions before our next break, and it looks like Josh has a question, so I'll turn it over to him.
Thank you very much. Yes, Pietro, that's wonderful work, very important scientifically and from a policy standpoint. I have a lot of echo, I think, but congratulations and keep going. That's terrific. I had one question on the multiple waves, on the mechanism of multiple waves in the non-vaccination case. And I'm wondering, I guess I'm assuming that those are happening because of premature relaxation of social distancing measures. And I'm just wondering, where in the model are those behavioral changes taking place? Are those instituted from the top down, or are they endogenous, mechanisms from the bottom up? I'm just wondering where, what's the mechanism of multiple waves in the model?
The mechanism of the multiple waves is a key result.
Yeah.
And in the model, we have the script managing exactly the decision of the government.
Okay.
When a relaxation is starting, we have again people around, and it is sufficient to have a few people bringing the infection. The infection was disappearing, but a few people were still there. They go around, mainly in shops, mainly in factories, not in school, because in Italy schools has been closed until the end of the spring. Maybe too much, because young people are not distributing the infection probably, but anyway, it has been a measure adopted. But as a relaxation was adopted, we saw the waves restarting. And what is confusing is the effect of the fall of 2020, when practically no more infection were in the region, but from the vacancies, infected people come back. And this has been our disgrace, our problem, a huge problem.
Very good, very good. Interesting. That's very interesting work.
Many thanks.
Thank you.
To see if there's an additional question out there. I don't see any right now. Oh, Tim has a question, so go ahead, Tim.
I've always got a question. We were able to do some work. Oof, boy, echo is bad.
I'm getting a lot of echoes from someone.
I wonder if Pietro, maybe if you went on mute for a second. I think it was coming. Well, no, it still happening.
Maybe if you turn off your video, Tim, would that help? I don't know.
I don't think it's my video.
Okay.
Oh yeah, there. I think it went. I think it was somehow we were feeding back through Pietro.
Sorry, it was outside of the phone. So
yeah. So Pietro, if you mute while I'm talking, I think we won't have echo.
Sorry?
If you put on your mute while I'm talking, yeah, now it doesn't feed back. Perfect.
I am again without audio. Sorry. The phone is getting out. Do you want to show again the slides?
No, this is good. This is fine.
Okay.
So something that we worked with a bunch of cell phone data, and we're able to come up with an approximate contact network between all the people in a city. And what we found was that the degree distributions were super fat-tailed. Some people have lots and lots of contacts. Most people have very few contacts. They weren't exactly power law, but they were definitely fat-tailed. And that, of course, most models don't have anything like that. Everyone has similar degree distribution. And this has a lot of implications for who you vaccinate. If you vaccinate the high degree people, you can make a big impact. I wasn't quite able to follow whether your model, are you modeling how people move around? What kind of contact degree distributions are you getting in your model? Do you know?
This has been a very heavy part of the work, because we started by an actual analysis of people, where people are living, where they go to work, how they move around, how they can interact in the different phases of the day. So as we introduce actually vaccination into the model, one people who is going around now is vaccinated and cannot receive the contagion, but in our scheme, it can distribute the contagion if becoming infected, because the most probable situation is that vaccinated people are always distributing the contagion. But anyway, as we increase the number of vaccinated, as an example, in a factory, the contagion there stops. And we have the exact situation, because we have reconstructed the region in scale, but with the correct number of factories in proportion. And most of all, each school, each factory, each home has the correct number of persons within. So family are of 3-4 persons. schools have classes of 25 people and so on. So the model is very realistic. It's constructed upon the region and heavy work, but it's possible, and it is possible to reproduce in other scales. Many
Very
thanks.
powerful. Great.
Many thanks.
Great, and it looks like Leo has a question.
Yeah, thank you. So this has to do actually with the question that was just asked, which was phrased in terms of like the degree distribution and in a network formalization. But if I understand your model correct, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's spatial, right? The agents are like embedded in space and moving around. And so then there's this question about like what counts towards the degree distribution of a given, or the degree of a given agent. So if you interact with one agent, maybe, or if one agent interacts with another just once randomly, maybe that should or shouldn't interact or contribute to their degree so much as another agent, which is actually like in their same home and they're interacting with all the time, but they have a much higher likelihood of spreading the disease to. So I'm wondering, when you're prioritizing who gets vaccinated, you know, building different strategies, how do we consider, how do we quantify how many agents is this agent related to or linked to, because it's not a network formalization?
So in the last phrase, so you can repeat how quantify?
Yeah, so how do you quantify how many agents any given agent comes in contact to? Because it's not a network formalization. There's no explicit links. It just has to do with spatial. Thank you.
The events are occurring in the model. So I verify that in a given home, now there is a vaccinated person and not vaccinated one. And in this case, the contagion has only one direction. I have no network effects. I have no a priori probability, but I measure the frequencies of the events. And as vaccinated people enter in the population, all the effects are changing automatically. I have two ways of quantifying the possibility of contagion: person to person or in closed space. In a class, in a classroom, in a factory, the presence of 1, 2, 3 infected people can infect 20, 24, 50, 100 other people for the event of the spreading of the virus in the air, for the distribution in the space. But it is ex ante calculation, ex post calculation, not ex ante evaluation. The addendum, I will add networks just to take in consideration parental relationships, because people are visiting parents, cousins, brothers, and so on. Friends are meeting also if it is forbidden, and so on. But it's very difficult, but we will try to do that. Many thanks for the question, very important.
That's great. So I think that is probably our last question for this time period. We're going to be taking another break at this point for 30 minutes, and we will begin at 2:30. I actually have to step out and handle some family matters, so I believe Chad Ratman will be rejoining us at 2:30. Thank you, everyone. If you haven't sent your slides yet for the next session, please do so. Take care.